Imagine this. Two uniformed officers, stern-faced and unyielding, march a black woman down a cold, narrow hallway inside a precinct. Their grips are tight on her arms, so tight her wrists ache, and the sound of their boots echoes against the linoleum floor like a drumbeat of impending doom. She protests loudly, her voice firm, commanding, the voice of someone who knows authority. What is the meaning of this? Let go of me right now. But the officers do not answer. To them, she is just another woman, another detainee to push around. What they don't realize is that the woman they're about to humiliate is not just anyone. She is Judge Monica Williams, one of the most respected figures in the city's entire judicial system. And within minutes, their arrogance will cost them everything. Only an hour earlier, Judge Williams' day had begun like so many others. She woke before sunrise, her morning a blend of calm rituals. A pot of coffee brewing, the rustle of newspaper pages, the faint hum of classical music in the background. For years she had built this life of routine and order, each day preparing herself for the immense responsibility she carried. As one of the city's most prominent African-American judges, she was known for her sharp intellect, her unwavering commitment to fairness, and a presence in the courtroom that demanded respect. When Judge Williams spoke, people listened. She had fought long and hard to earn her position, breaking through barriers that had kept others like her away from the bench for decades. Her reputation was flawless. So when the phone rang that morning with an urgent request from the precinct, she didn't hesitate. These calls were not unusual. Sometimes her signature was needed to move paperwork forward, other times her judgment was required on matters that couldn't wait. Still, something about this call felt different. The voice on the other end was hurried, vague, almost nervous. She could feel it in her bones, a heaviness in her chest, an instinct honed from years on the bench, that today was not going to be like any other day. When she arrived at the precinct, her instincts were confirmed. The atmosphere was off. The usual rhythm of chatter, phones ringing, and clerks shuffling papers was missing. Instead, she noticed whispers. Officers pacing in tight circles. Nervous glances exchanged like secrets. The air felt charged, like a storm about to break. She walked through it with her usual composure, heels clicking against the tiled floor, head held high, though a quiet tension coiled in her stomach. The captain called her into his office almost immediately. His face was etched with urgency as he explained they had a suspect in custody and they needed her immediate approval to proceed with the next step. It sounded routine enough, but something about his tone didn't sit right with her. Still, she agreed, pulling a pen from her bag, ready to review the documents. Yet as the minutes passed, she realized the captain wasn't focused on her. His eyes darted to the door, his foot tapped rapidly under the desk, and the officers outside looked jittery, almost distracted. Then, in a sudden, shocking moment, two officers barged into the office. Without explanation, they seized her by the arms. At first, Judge Williams thought it was some kind of bizarre mistake. "Excuse me. What do you think you're doing?" she snapped, her voice steady but rising. They didn't answer. Their grips tightened as they dragged her toward the hallway. "This is outrageous. I am a judge," she shouted, but her words bounced off the walls, ignored. For the first time in years, a cold wave of panic began creeping up her spine. They shoved her into a small, dimly lit room. The heavy door clicked shut behind her. That's when her eyes fell on the table in front of her. A razor. Electric clippers. A towel. Officers stood around, their faces unreadable, their eyes empty of remorse. She realized with horror what they intended to do. They were going to shave her head. Humiliate her. Strip her of the dignity she had spent her entire life protecting. She tried to rise from the chair, but they forced her back down. Her heart hammered in her chest as she shouted, "Stop this right now. You have no idea what you're doing." But her words, once so powerful in courtrooms, seemed to fall on deaf ears here. The buzzing of the clippers filled the room like a swarm of angry bees. One officer smirked, raising the razor closer to her scalp. In that instant, Judge Williams felt the walls closing in, her position, her power, her very identity under attack. She knew exactly what this was, not law enforcement, not procedure, but pure degradation. They thought she was just another black woman they could reduce, control, humiliate. But then, in the moment before the razor touched her head, everything shifted. One of the officers faltered. He leaned closer, studying her face. His eyes narrowed, his breathing quickened. "Wait," he muttered. The clippers stopped midair. "I think I know you." Judge Williams, breath sharp and eyes blazing, stared him down. "What do you mean you know me?" she shot back, her voice trembling with both rage and fear. The officer's expression changed from confusion to shock. "You're Judge Williams, aren't you?" The room fell silent. The realization spread like fire among them. They looked at one another, pale and stricken. This wasn't some nameless woman. This wasn't someone powerless. They had just laid their hands on Judge Monica Williams, the presiding judge on their very case. A woman whose authority in the system was absolute. Their smirks vanished, their hands trembled, and suddenly they were the ones drowning in fear. Judge Williams straightened her posture, reclaiming every ounce of dignity they had tried to strip from her. Her voice was no longer that of a victim, but of a judge delivering a sentence. "Do you realize who I am?" she said coldly. "I am Judge Monica Williams. And you have just crossed a line that will destroy you." The officers stammered, fumbling for apologies, their arrogance collapsing into pitiful excuses. But she wasn't interested. She pulled out her phone with steady hands and dialed internal affairs right there in front of them, making sure every word was recorded. "This will not be buried. Every detail of what you've done will be reported." The sound of her voice was like a gavel striking wood, final and undeniable. The razor clattered to the floor as one officer dropped it in defeat. Within hours, the story broke across every news outlet. Police officers humiliate black woman, she turns out to be the presiding judge on their case. Headlines screamed with outrage. Social media exploded with fury. Hashtags demanding justice trended nationwide. Protesters filled the streets, holding signs, chanting for accountability, their voices rising in unison. The humiliation of Judge Williams became more than just her story, it became a symbol of what countless others had suffered quietly for years. The investigation moved quickly. The officers claimed it was all a misunderstanding, a case of mistaken identity, but the truth surfaced. It was bias, arrogance, and abuse of power. Their careers unraveled in days. Administrative leave, formal charges of misconduct, discrimination, and abuse of authority followed swiftly. Judge Williams, meanwhile, stood resolute. She did not call for vengeance, but for justice, not just for herself, but for everyone who had been silenced or disrespected by the very system meant to protect them. In court, the tables turned. The officers who once dragged her now stood before her bench, heads lowered, stripped of their swagger. She presided with the same composure she always had, but her words carried a deeper weight. "Justice," she declared, "is not a privilege. It is mandatory. And no badge, no uniform, no position exempts anyone from it." The courtroom echoed with her verdict, and the city listened. Her ordeal sparked reforms within the department, internal reviews, and a public reckoning. What they had intended as humiliation became the very fire that ignited change. And when Judge Monica Williams walked out of the courthouse after the trial, the crowd erupted in applause, their chants of support filling the streets. She had become more than a judge, she was a symbol, a reminder that dignity, justice, and truth can never be silenced. The sunset painted the city in gold as she raised her head high, a figure of strength walking into the next battle, knowing this was only the beginning of a much larger fight.